tough enough perimeter defenses to keep them out. So, I looked at him, changing the subject. When are you going to decant the colonists? I'm waking the setup management team right now. A couple of hours, they'll be ready to start. Unlike the land-based colonies in other systems, the teams here would be working from the colony transport, Monty, for a considerable time, and the civilian population likely wouldn't start to emerge for a good 6 months. Future shipments would have it a little easier. We had a number of variations on floating city plans on file. Free-floating cities had been a bit of a thing for a while in the 22nd century. Of course, they had access to land-based support, and they didn't have to deal with predators up to 100 meters long with tentacles. Discussions with the prep team hadn't taken as long as I expected. I guess there'd been a lot of planning before they'd launched from Earth's system, and there hadn't been any surprises at this end. Yet. I had tagged all the biggest mats with beacons, so we knew what was available. The prep team picked a couple of large mats that were drifting in the North Tropical Current. They were both well over 100 square kilometers in area, complete with commensal ecosystems. Within a day, we were ferrying down supplies and equipment. The colonists, a conglomerate of enclaves from Micronesia, the Maldives, Vanuatu, and St. Lucia, would have to be awoken in small groups as living space was constructed on the mats. It would be about a year before Monty would be able to leave. Marcus would be staying here to help with the colony setup after Monty headed back to Earth. He would build a fleet of human-crewed spaceships so that the colonists wouldn't be dependent on us. With no land on Poseidon, all industry would have to be space-based, and Marcus didn't want to play permanent taxi to the world. Marcus popped in without warning. "We just lost another settler. Kraken?" Marcus nodded and sat down. He took a moment to give Spike a chin scritch, then materialized a Coke. "I'm sure Chief Draper is pissed," Monty said. "We have to come up with some better defense. We could go through the entire setup team pretty fast." "Or we could reconsider flying cities." Marcus grinned at me. "Oh, for Pete's sake, Marcus. There are no plans in the libraries for flying cities." "Yeah? But you could start with Bill's asteroid mover, and I bet you could end up with something that would hold a city in the air." "Let us know when you have a design there, Marcus." Marcus made a dismissive gesture and changed the subject. "Well, we can't stick to the status quo. The Krakens will just keep getting bolder. But building floating cities without an established land base of some kind is going to require some inventive rethinking." "Can we beef up the protection around the floating mats?" Monty asked. In response, Marcus popped up a schematic view of the island. "Here's the problem. The Kraken are able to wriggle a tentacle through the mat and grab inland prey. Native life has figured out how to tread lightly, but humans have 2 left feet, so to speak. Plus," I added, "all the equipment makes a racket." Monty rubbed his forehead, looking disgusted. Any ideas? Serious ones, I mean?" "Actually, yes," Marcus nodded. "I can adapt some library plans to construct an electrified net that discharges on contact. 1,000,000 volts or so should provide some negative reinforcement. Or a watery grave. Either is good." I nodded. "Nice." Marcus grinned at me. "Now the bad news. To build the net and to build the equipment necessary to deploy it, we'll add 6 months to our schedule. Draper will take that about as well as Butterworth would." "Moo," I replied. "Yeah, like that." Monty groaned. "I'm not thrilled either. It means I'm stuck here for another 6 months." "Suck it up. You're immortal." "Bite me." We all grinned at each other. The routine exchange of insults felt sort of reassuring. "Well," Marcus finally said, "guess we'd better go break the news." "What do you mean, we, Kemosabe?" Marcus laughed and popped out. 50. Second Expedition. Loki, November 2195, 82 Eridne. We flew straight into the 82 Eridne system without attempting any finesse. We were here to kick some ass, and more importantly, to finish the job that Khan and his group had started. 12 Bobs, with version 4 vessels featuring even more heavily shielded reactors than the 3s, and total radio silence. Special carbon black exteriors ensured an almost zero albedo, and we had borrowed from the military to arrive at profiles that were virtually invisible to radar. The only place we were vulnerable was SUDAR detection, and as far as we knew, we had the range advantage in that area. There was no point in being subtle, but being tricky was definitely on the menu. We spread a net of observation drones in front of us, coasting with minimal systems. Interspersed with them were ship busters and decoy drones. Scud connections with every drone and buster guaranteed instant communications. Whether the enemy detected our outriders first or us first, we could still throw a surprise at them. We didn't know, of course, whether there were any Madeiri left from the first expedition, or for that matter, whether the Madeiros that escaped at Alpha Centauri might have made his way here. Best case, there would be nothing but the Brazilian Amies, still patrolling the system looking for things to blow up. We'd brought plenty of decoys to cover that eventuality as well. Yep, we were loaded for bear. We just had to hope that Madeiros hadn't invented a bigger, better bear. Ultra-low-intensity version 4 SUDAR wouldn't even be detectable to traditional SUDAR receivers unless the listener was specifically looking for it. We came into the system like a person in a pitch-black room, carefully feeling our way forward and ready to pull in our toes at the slightest sign of an obstacle. We needn't have bothered. Madeiros might not have a bigger bear, but he definitely had some kind of passive early warning system that we couldn't detect. We were met by a solid wall of oncoming ordnance. The first engagement looked like a Republic versus Empire Star Wars shoot-'em-up, and again, Madeiros was using cloaking technology, but this time we were ready for that. It looked like Madeiros continued to depend on nukes as his main weapon. 4 enemy drones detonated simultaneously as soon as they were within range of our defenders. Nothing was going to survive being up close and personal with an exploding fission bomb, but in space the shockwave was a strictly short-range issue. At any distance, the main force of destruction would be the EMP, and we'd engineered for that. This time. It took Madeiros a dozen ineffective nukes before he caught on to the fact that we weren't affected. At that point, flying nukes started trying to get in closer. We spiked them. We busterized them. We confused them with our own set of decoys. And we watched and listened for the source of the commands. Then, Madeiros showed that he had learned from our last encounter. A wave of attack drones came at us that were completely different from the traditional flying nukes. Our attempts to spike them just bounced off. Oh, this is bad. What's spike-proof? Possibly something with a defensive magnetic field, Elmer replied. We'll need to use busters on these guys. Good call, Elmer. Okay, everyone deploy half your busters forward. Any enemy drone that survives a spiking gets busterized. A flood of busters accelerated toward the oncoming ordnance. We carefully staggered them so that Madeiros couldn't catch multiple busters with one nuke. The first contact produced so much carnage between detonations and debris that we couldn't resolve the battlefield for several precious seconds. Then I remembered reading the report on Riker's first battle in Sol. Scatter, watch for passive incoming. I sent a SUDAR pulse ahead as I turned and accelerated at 90 degrees. Sure enough, the ping showed a massive number of dense objects hurtling toward us. It was too late for 3 of us, though. Jeffrey, Milton, and Zeke disappeared from the status board as their signals cut off. The only good thing about this attack strategy, if something could be considered good, was that the passive ordnance couldn't chase us. With the field now clearing, we could verify that there wasn't another wave on the way. At least not yet. I wasn't going to make any assumptions. Our second wave of busters now engaged the remaining enemy drones. Up close, the busters had an advantage, and we recorded almost 100% kills. A momentary lull in encounters allowed me to scan the battlefield. For the moment, there was no movement. The question now was, did Madeiros have more in reserve? A second SUDAR sweep showed another wave of enemy ordnance coming in. We weren't anywhere near done yet. A quick count showed Madeiros had more drones than we had busters. This put us at a definite disadvantage. Plasma spikes helped to even things out with unprotected drones, though, and since building nukes was expensive of time and resources, I had to hope some of that incoming consisted of decoys. Has anyone picked up any transmissions from Medeiros yet? A chorus of no's came back to me. Damn. One of our planned strategies was to triangulate on the Brazilian craft's transmissions. Our last battle with him had shown the wisdom of cutting off the head, but Medeiros seemed to have learned from last time in that area as well. I accepted a call from one of the crew. Hey, Loki? What's up, Vern? I've been doing an analysis of Medeiros' attack strategy. I don't think he's actively controlling the battle. Pre-programmed decision trees? If so, those are very smart Amy's. We saw them running through some sophisticated strategies. I think it's a bit of both. Oh, great, that's helpful. I could hear the smile in Vern's voice. Well, it is, kind of. He's probably set up a number of different battle scenarios and canned responses with different goal weightings. He changes response trees with a very short command sequence, maybe a couple of bytes and a checksum, too short to triangulate on. Then the Amy's are on their own. Now that was interesting. In that case, he can only have one response tree going at a time, right? Correct. Unless he's giving separate orders to different squads, and in that case I think we'd have picked up on multiple transmissions. Excellent. I considered for a millisecond. Attention everyone, we are going to split into groups, by the numbers, and execute strategies 1 through 4. Let's see how well the Amy pilots handle too many different scenarios. Vern and Surly, activate the radio jammers. Everyone acknowledged, and we split off in various directions, each vessel accompanied by its personal cloud of drones and busters. For a wonder, it appeared to work. Some of the Brazilian Amy's seemed to be coping, but more of them became confused. There was a small group that would rush towards a heaven contingent, stop, rush towards another one, then reverse and repeat. Gotta love Amy's. And then Medeiros panicked. Unable to regain control of his drones, he cranked up his radio transmission power and attempted to outshout the jammer. He might as well have put on a hat with a flashing red light. Vern and Surly immediately released the Death Squad, a batch of busters specifically programmed to latch onto the Mediri with Sudar and not to let go until they were space junk. The Death Squad shot forward at close to 40 G, and I imagined them yelling, "Whee!" in high-pitched minion voices. In next to no time, the Death Squad surrounded the Mediri. There were 2 Brazilian vessels, and destroyed them. However, this time, we were going to be thorough. As soon as they got the recall order, the busters took off after the Brazilian drones. There would be no peace until every piece of Brazilian equipment in the system was obliterated. It took a further 18 hours to track down every fusion signature in the system. I took a video call from Elmer. Looks clear now. Anything still alive will have gone to ground. Time to implement Phase 3? You bet, Elmer. Again, I switched to command channel. Okay, everyone, Phase 3. Surly, release the Hunter-Seekers. I heard several snickers, hastily suppressed. Dune didn't have a particularly good reputation among the Bobs. The Hunter-Seekers were essentially drones optimized for long-distance searching. Their Sudars were able to reach to almost 4 light hours. By overlapping search fields, they could get increased definition of anything they ran across. It would take a week, but they would cover every inch of the star system, identify any refined metal up to a kilometer deep underground, and relay that information to busters for remedial action. Meanwhile, we examined the battle records. That's an Alpha Centauri, Medeiros, Hank said. You sure? Absolutely. Hank pulled up images of the 82 Eridani Medeiros group from our first battle, then images of the Alpha Centauri Medeiros group as recorded by Calvin and Goku. The differences were subtle, but the 2 probes were definitely based on slightly different designs. It came as no surprise that the Brazilians would have worked on improvements even as they were building and launching probes. Apparently, the first and second probes to leave Earth had been... Oh, hold on. That would require 3 different launches from Earth. 1 to Epsilon Eridani to fight Bob 1, 1 to Alpha Centauri, and 1 to 82 Eridani. Sure enough, my memory of Bob's Medeiros was yet a 3rd design variant. That meant that we couldn't depend on our estimates of the total Mediri in the universe. Life just sucked sometimes. I announced this information to the squad and got the expected groans. Okay, guys, looks like Medeiros will continue to be our snidely whiplash, showing up in every episode to set traps and twirl his mustache. But meanwhile, we have this system. Let's split up and finish the survey. You know that there are colony ships on the way to Vulcan that can be redirected here with minimal delay. We want to get that word to them as soon as possible, if it's warranted. And let's keep in mind that Bill wants tech samples. We're looking especially for cloaking technology and fission bomb designs. This was something all the Bobs could get behind enthusiastically. War was something we did reluctantly and only by necessity. Exploration? Well, that was fun. Wow, Milo really did hit the jackpot. Vern grinned from ear to ear as he popped up survey results. The rest of us nodded, grunted, or muttered hell yes according to our temperaments. This was indeed a major find. 2 habitable planets. 1 to the inside edge of the habitable zone and 1 to the outside edge. The outer planet had 2 moons, one of which was also habitable, although barely. The air was very thin. It would be like living in the Andes. You'd need to acclimate over time. Except that Bill had taken on terraforming as a hobby. I grinned at the thought, producing quizzical looks from some of the others. The moon's atmosphere would outgas over geological timescales, but we could replenish it over human timescales. It would require ongoing maintenance, but it had been a long time since humanity had just accepted the environment as we found it. We bumped up the priority on biocompatibility analysis. If everything checked out, this could be worth redirecting in-flight colony ships for. 51. Wedding. Howard, April 2195, Vulcan. The bride was beautiful. The groom was French. And I wanted to be drunk. I even talked to Bill about modifying the VR. He told me to quit being an idiot. And idiot is what I was being. Hello, Earth to Howard, computer, remember? I was on my best behavior, wished them well, made small talk, and left as soon as I could. I made a call to one of 2 lawyers doing business in Landing. Yes, lawyers, some things you just can't get rid of. Ms. Benning picked up right away.
Good afternoon, Mr. Johansson. I have the paperwork completed and everything has been properly filed. We just need a few signatures from the other 2 parties and everything will be legal.
I nodded. Any issues with me not being, human?
Nothing is ever settled in law, as you may well know.
She smiled into the phone.
But filing 2 sets of paperwork, one based on you having a legal standing and one based on the converse, should take care of any but the most determined challenges.
Thank you. Forward the paperwork to the Brodeurs. I'll make sure they sign it and return it promptly. I hung up the phone and sighed deeply. Once they signed the papers, Mr. and Mrs. Brodeur would own 100% of the distillery. It would be my wedding present to them. Plus, it would leave me with no ties to Vulcan, and that would be good. Dexter popped into my VR, raised his coffee in salute, and sat down. He had escorted Exodus 7 to Vulcan and had taken my offer to stay on as resident Bob. He appraised me without speaking for several milliseconds. I waited, content with the silence. So, you're joining the freaking Foreign Legion. Could you be any more cliché? I laughed. I couldn't help it. I guess I am on both counts. What's it to you? I thought being a replicant meant all that was behind us. Maybe in 100 years, Dexter. Or maybe 1,000. They're ephemerals. I'm just going to make a point of remembering that. I gestured vaguely at the star map I'd been perusing. And I'm out of here. Sam from Exodus 3 envied me being able to stay in one place and watch it grow. Now, you get to try it for yourself. I want to go see what's out there. Dexter nodded slowly. I've been reading your blog. Good detail. It shouldn't be too hard to step in. Have you picked a target system yet? Not really. I've got several likely-looking targets. We're far enough away from the others that it isn't an immediate concern. I'll probably just Flip a coin. I leaned forward. First, I have one last set of goodbyes to take care of. You've got the keys, Dexter. Good luck. Dexter stood, nodded to me, and popped out. The parting wasn't as final with the Bobs, of course. I'd still be available by Scud if I kept my towel low enough, and I'd be available in any case once I reached my destination. Now for the hard part. Stefan passed the documents back and forth from hand to hand as if they were burning him. His gaze kept shifting to everywhere except my image on the phone. Bridget looked as though she was fighting back tears. I couldn't tell if she was just upset about me leaving or if she suspected some of the reasons. "It's not the distillery, Howard," Stefan said. "It's a generous thing you do. The company is becoming one of the biggest on Vulcan, but why? Not even why leave, but why give it up?" Like I said, Stefan, it's a wedding gift. I really have no need for money, and I think it's easier if I cut all ties. Stefan nodded and stood silently for a few moments. Then he looked at the phone, finally, and said in almost a whisper, "I will miss you, mon ami." He exchanged a look with Bridget, and she nodded once. He took the papers and, without looking back, left the room. Bridget hesitated for a moment, then came over and sat down in front of the phone.
"Howard, when you introduced Stefan and I, isn't this what you had in mind?"
"Okay then, no pretense. I didn't have anything in mind, Bridget. Just wanted to have my two besties in the room at the same time, I guess. Seems to have worked." Bridget jerked back slightly, a hurt look on her face. It was a petty thing to say, and I was immediately sorry. "Look, Bridget, I didn't have some master plan. Apparently, I didn't even have a clue. I guess it took me this long to really get that I'm not human. I'm not part of the dance anymore."
"You're human, Howard, where it matters. I wish I'd met you when you were still alive."
"Me too." I paused the appropriate amount of human time. "I guess I'd better go. Places to go, species to meet." She smiled, gave me a small wave, and disconnected. Just before the image blinked out, I saw her eyes well up. 52. Bullwinkle. Bill. December 2195, Epsilon Eridani. I was touring the Ragnarok landscape in Bullwinkle when I got a ping from Garfield. I sent an IM back. "What's up?" Garfield responded on audio only. I hadn't implemented heads-up visuals yet, and I didn't want to exit the moose. "Reports back from 82 Eridani. Well, that would be interesting, no matter how it had ended up. Come to think of it, the fact that someone was still alive to report back limited the extent to which the news could be bad. I tried to focus on that thought. I shut down Bullwinkle and called the transport drone to come and get him. It took a moment to refocus myself in my regular VR. Garfield was sitting at the table swiping through a report. "Well?" Garfield leaned back and grinned. "It'll take a while to go through everything, and they're still consolidating, but it's looking damned good. A couple of the guys are checking biocompatibility. Unless there's something really poisonous, we have 3 new colony targets." He reached forward and popped up a couple of items in separate windows. "Then there's this. One of the advantages of using busters as a weapon is there's lots of wreckage to examine. Loki thinks he may already be getting a handle on the cloaking stuff." Garfield's grin looked like it was becoming permanent. "We've also got a couple of unexploded fission bombs. The guys will be very careful, of course, but we think a V4 Sudar Pulse might be able to get us a scan without setting off a booby trap." "Excellent." I sat down and requested a couple of coffees from Jeeves. I was silent for a moment, scrubbing my face with my hands. "The thing is, Gar, even with this stuff, we can't do more than delay and annoy the others. The more I see of them, the bigger and more invincible they look. Their population, based on the latest models, could easily be a couple of 100 billion. They could field a space navy that would just roll over us if we really pissed them off." Garfield nodded, a morose expression on his face. After a short silence, he looked up at me. "How's it going with Bullwinkle? I notice you no longer have a drone following." "Yippers? I was glad to change the subject. Improvements in miniaturization, local processing, better comms. I still need a large body, but it's coming down gradually. Not quite to the point of a human body yet. Still too big for Rocky? Afraid so, buddy. Working on it, though. So, what's your ultimate goal? To walk in and punch Cranston right in the nose. Garfield threw his head back and laughed. We settled into the pub, beers and coffees scattered around the tables. Another game of scrub, another reminder that I was never an athlete. I grinned at the thought. At least there were no jocks around to rub it in anymore. Monty parked himself at my table and took a tentative sip of his beer. I'd recently introduced a new dark beer that I thought was a serviceable substitute for Guinness. I watched him carefully. Monty stared at the glass for a moment, nodded, and took a deeper sip. Success! I messaged Guppy to add the beer to the menu. Hey, Monty, how's things up Poseidon Way? Monty raised the glass in my direction. Pretty good, actually, Bill. We had a couple of bad months where the Krakens started hanging around a lot hoping for a meal, but the new underwater defenses seem to be gradually changing their minds. But you're still going ahead with the floating city plans. Oh, sure. Monty shrugged. No matter what you do, living on a floating plant mat is still going a little more native than most of the colonists are comfortable with. Proper cities will mean permanent construction, transit, and all the amenities that we like to call civilization. And you'll be out of there. He laughed. Yeah, you caught me. As soon as they have enough infrastructure and redundancy to handle their own destiny, I'm heading out. I've had enough of shepherding humans, you know? I smiled at him, but his comments worried me. New Bobs were increasingly voicing an unwillingness to hang around and help humanity. On top of the tendency to use dismissive language, it told me that there was some kind of shift in psychology going on. Then I admitted to myself that I might be the one out of step. I'd been holed up at Epsilon Eridani for 50 years, with only second-hand exposure to humanity. It was easy for me to have an attitude. Bob's clone from Riker's tree might just be getting heartily sick of people. Anyway, there were still enough interested Bobs to keep things rolling. I decided not to worry about it. I could always start my own dynasty if I needed to. I looked around for Howard, but didn't see him. The Moot directory indicated he hadn't shown up today. Now there was a case of going too far in the other direction. The man was head over heels over a human. Everyone but Howard could see it. Had original Bob ever been that naive? I sighed. Yeah, he had. Riker was surrounded by a group of Bobs being grilled on the situation on Earth. The results from 82 Eridani would certainly have caused a stir with the enclaves. I had a to-do to talk to Will about it myself, but I wasn't going to wade into that scrum. It could wait. Marvin and Luke came over and joined Monty and me. Hi, Bill. Sorry to be a pest. It's okay, Marv, I understand. No, still nothing from Bender. Sorry. Unless he decided to pull a Mario and head for the far reaches. I think the greatest likelihood is that something happened to him. Marvin looked downcast, and Luke nodded and looked away. Those three were from the same cohort, so they were related in a way that was somehow one step closer than mere clonedom. It was now coming up on 30 years since Luke and Bender left Delta Eridani. The chances of an innocent explanation for Bender's silence became smaller every year. Marvin laced his fingers together and put his forehead to them for a moment. Victor followed Bender's departure vector. So far, nothing. He thinks Bender may have changed direction at some point. Victor's not willing to backtrack, so we're thinking of mounting an expedition. My eyebrows rose. Going after him? Space is pretty big. What do you think your chances are? Luke leaned forward, arms encircling his drink. You know we leave a trail when we fly between systems. The gas is slightly thinner along the flight path of a Heaven vessel where we've scooped it up. It's not much, and you have to be very careful, but even if he changed course mid-flight, we should be able to follow his new vector. Okay. You know where he was aiming when he left Eden. I guess you just start with that? Marvin and Luke nodded in sync. It would take decades, if not centuries. Then I smiled, still thinking like an ephemeral. How long it would take was irrelevant. We had forever. 53. Testing. HAL, April 2196, GL 877. I wasn't really what you'd call happy to be back. Last time I was here, I had died. Hopefully, things would go better this time. I did a quick status check on my cloud of attendants. I was surrounded by just under 100 drones and one Amy-driven Heaven decoy vessel. The decoy obediently matched my actions as I decelerated. The drones scattered to pre-assigned positions around the periphery of the star system. They would serve as an early warning system for any comings and goings by the others. They were designed to give as little evidence of their presence as possible. Low profile, no albedo to speak of, total radio silence. And heavily shielded reactors meant they showed very little footprint to the universe at large. And booby-trapped, of course. If the others ever got hold of Scut tech, we would be royally hooped. The decoy had been constructed with all the improvements suggested by Thor, 2 layers of depleted uranium alternating with 2 layers of electrostatic shielding. We'd added redundancies for every major control system with automatic failovers. It also had multiple independent self-destruct mechanisms and the usual booby traps. My new body had some improvements as well. I'd sacrificed buster storage in favor of a larger reactor and surge drive. At 15G capability, I could now outrun the others, assuming that I'd seen their A game last time out. Today's entertainment was in aid of testing our mods against the Death Asteroid. If Decoy 1 could survive a zapping, we were golden. If it couldn't, well, no one really wanted to ask that question. I sent the activation order. Decoy 1 broke off from my vector and accelerated towards the inner system. The Scut connection gave me a video window into the chase. The decoy was carefully sticking to 10G as it ran from the others' battle group, or squad, or whatever they called their standard collection of ships. We hadn't tried to be subtle with the sweep through the inner system, and the decoy had, predictably, picked up a tail. It looked as though we were less than an hour away from the big event. I accepted a ping, and Mario popped into my VR. "I love car chases," he said, grinning at me. "Especially the ones with big crashes," I replied. I was forwarding the telemetry to Bill for the archives as well. I hadn't heard from him, but I imagined he was monitoring as time permitted. Mario got comfortable, Jeeves brought coffees, and we sat back to watch the show. 2 minutes later, the Death Asteroid zapped the decoy, just as the decoy had finished a SUDAR scan of its pursuers. The decoy forwarded a complete set of readings to us, then blew itself up. Mario and I looked at each other, our eyes wide. I spoke first. "That was, a little early." "Yeah. Looks like Garfield was a bit off on his estimates of the internal capabilities of the Death Asteroids. He's going to have to rejigger his models." I checked the received telemetry. "Well, fortunately we got a good scan just at the end. This should help." I took a close look at the scan of the Death Asteroid. "Or not. Look at that." I pointed to a section of the scan. "That looks like living area. Why the crap would they need that much living area?" Mario thought for a moment. "Either they're really, really big, or the Death Asteroid requires a lot of personnel to run, or they really, really like each other, like naked mole rats or something." Huh. Questions and more questions. "Well, we've got this much done anyway. The decoy took a few hit points, but by and large, I'd say the shielding was a success." Mario nodded. "We'll see what Thor and Garfield have to say at the next moot." He raised his cup to me, finished his coffee in a gulp, and popped out. I turned myself around, pointed the bow at GL 54, and headed home. 54. Stuff is happening. HAL, October 2197, en route to GL 54. I was 18 months into my journey when I got a message from Bill. At my current Tau, any kind of real-time interaction was out of the question. I couldn't frame jack nearly high enough to overcome the time dilation, so communications tended to wait until the end of a trip, or they came as emails, as in this case. I grabbed the sheet and read it. How? Well, the fecal matter seems to have struck the atmospheric propulsor. A squad of others' vessels was detected leaving GL-877, heading for GL-54. To be fair, scouting by other Bobs indicates that other, closer systems have already been stripped, so this isn't necessarily anything more than a normal scavenging mission. Just the same, Mario has decided to hit the road along with every piece of equipment he has. We're going to leave a couple of drones behind for observation and use one to try communicating with the others. If they react by pointing one of the death asteroids at us, we'll blow up the drone. Just thought you should know. It looks like we're heading for a formal first contact. You may want to reroute. Bill. Oh, fudge. May you live in interesting times. 55. Contact. Bill. October 2204, GL 54. Mario was now in mid-trip, fleeing GL-54 for Zeta Tucanae, so it was up to me to handle the introductions when the others arrived. I couldn't help but feel a certain level of nervousness. These were the beings that had blown up Bashful and Hal. There were a lot of ways this could go down, but I didn't think friendly was in the expected range. Before he left, Mario did a little preparatory construction. He had 4 stealth drones set up for observation and a non-stealth drone for making contact. With Scut Communications, I could easily control them from here in Epsilon Eridani. The contact drone made me chuckle. The hull was shiny, the reactor leaked neutrons like a sieve, and in the radio spectrum the drone was as noisy as an unshielded electric motor. I thought he might have overdone the yuck, but it was certainly a masterpiece. It also had an antenna dish for tight beaming radio telemetry to a non-existent mothership, which I thought was a great touch. We wanted the others to underestimate us, right up to the moment we would deliver the knockout punch. The others' convoy was impressive. 10 death asteroids, a couple hundred small attendants, and 20 huge cylindrical hulks that I assumed would be cargo ships. These last units were upwards of 10 kilometers in length and a kilometer in diameter. I tried to estimate the tonnage of metals that they could transport, and my mind boggled at the results. Interestingly, though, based on a rough calculation, the total cargo capacity was within an order of magnitude of what they'd need to strip this system. Either they had previously scouted the system, or they had some way to get a good estimate of available resources beforehand. Or maybe they just lucked out. They might make multiple trips if a system had enough resources to justify it. Well, that was something for the future. I activated the communications drone, placed it right in the path of the incoming armada, and squirted a radio signal at them. For a first attempt, it was the most basic of communications. The first 10 prime numbers represented as a series of blips. Then, I waited for a response. I had listed a number of possibilities while waiting for them to arrive. It might be the next 10 primes, or it might be my message relayed back to me in reverse, or it might be another mathematical series, or it might be a blast of cosmic rays. I was not expecting an audio message in Mandarin. Fortunately, I had a translation routine on file, such things having been fairly standard issue in the 22nd century.
We see you, food. Your time is not yet. Move aside.
Well, blow me down. Food, am I? I was so flummoxed that it took me almost a half second to come up with a response. It occurred to me during that time that I shouldn't react too quickly. If they thought I was biological, so much the better. We are not attempting to block you. This unit is obviously too small for that. We are trying to communicate.
To what purpose? To beg for mercy? An interesting idea, mercy. We learned it from the cybernetic unit that we captured. We have no such concept.
Do you have a concept of exchange of information?
If it benefits us.
Well, that was something anyway. Based on Hal's experience, I had a couple of minutes before they were close enough to zap the drone, assuming they were going to do so, which I figured was a pretty safe bet. Why are you stripping systems?
For resources and food. Is this not obvious?
Yes, but why not just colonize the star systems?
Another concept that we learned from the captured unit. Colonization requires splitting the hive. Splitting the hive means a new prime. A new prime and another hive means war. This does not benefit us. Better to simply collect resources so that the hive can grow.
Okay. A picture was forming, something insect-like. Prime was probably some equivalent to a queen. I noted that they were coming up past the position of one of the stealth drones. These units were equipped with the new 4 light-hour ultra-low-power SUDAR units. I hoped to get a scan without alerting them. Can primes not cooperate?
Sub-primes can be controlled, but not over interstellar distances. We know you are using this dialogue to probe for information. This amuses us. The scurrying of food as it evades the inevitable end is perhaps for us what you mean by art.
Okay, that was just sick. We seek information, sometimes even if there is no benefit.
That makes no sense.
The beings at Zeta Tucani, you obliterated them.
They were food, and they would have tried to prevent the harvesting.
Is there no way we can coexist? The universe is a large place.
That also makes no sense. You are food. It is not the purpose of food to coexist. We will, in time, make our way to your soul and your Epsilon Iridini. We have seen your radio beacons. Food always thus announces itself.
Oh, wow. Fermi paradox resolved. I checked my system status and noted that my drone was probably 30 seconds away from getting zapped. I decided to try and time the SUDAR scan to coincide with that, in hopes that the zap might either command all their attention or blind their systems for a few moments. You are building what we would call a Dyson sphere. Is this for your population?
Yes. The construct will allow up to 500 million times the livable area. We will not run out of space within the lifetime of the Prime.
And afterwards?
Irrelevant. That is the concern of the next Prime.
Isn't overpopulation a concern? Overcrowding?
There can never be too many of us. There can only be not enough food.
At that moment, the stealth drone detected the outgoing zap. The other's spokesman hadn't even bothered with a throwaway line or anything. I was absurdly irritated. You'd think I'd deserve at least hasta la vista. Per instructions, the stealth drone did a quick series of snapshot scans of the other's vessels. Then the zap arrived, and the communications drone exploded on cue. I noted, from the point of view of the stealth drone, that a squad of others immediately took off in the direction that the communication drone's directional antenna had been transmitting. Serve them right. Let them waste time casting around. I sat back and stared into space. This was big. This was going to need a moot, for sure. 56. Descendants. Bob, January 2183, Delta Iridini. Buster grunted as he released the arrow. It flew dead true and buried itself in the target. Archimedes whooped from the sidelines, and Buster's little brother and sister yelled insults. Another universality, apparently. Buster turned to his opponent, Arnold's son, and waggled his ears. Donald looked distinctly uncomfortable, but wasn't going to back down in front of the entire Hexkey. Donald released the arrow. It hit the edge of the target. Not a kill shot, but certainly crippling if it had hit a live target. Arnold shrugged and yelled something supportive. I took a moment to smile at the number of new faces that had grown up over the last few years. Child mortality had dropped significantly with the reduction in the gorilloid threat. and the Deltan population was up to over 1,100. Archimedes' family had grown as well, 3 children and a 4th on the way. I was finally beginning to get an idea of the lifespan,